I know it's hard after a long day of school to sit for a little bit longer. We're going to try to make the session very, very active because we're going to be doing a lot and talking about a lot, and it's going to be a quick hour. So we're going to kind of just keep on pace. I want to start out today by talking a little bit about what this session is and is not going to be. So we're going to be focusing on two things today. We're going to be learning basic how word sorts go down in Words Their Way lessons, and then 5 tips for success. Our goals today really are to describe the Words Their Way procedures and then identify some solutions for common instructional challenges that come up in our classroom. So what we will not really be looking at today so much is assessment or about what should I teach when, because those are very complex topics that can't be addressed in the course of an hour. Ms. Heath over here is an expert, so she can help you, and I'm always available for additional help afterward. And Denise can also give you a hand with that as well. So, why use Words Their Way? Well, Words Their Way is a very powerful instructional routine. In 15 minutes a day, we can help build our students' spelling skills, vocabulary skills, and decoding skills, like that. As you can see over here, Words Their Way addresses standards, so the Indiana ELA standards, and it also builds awareness of knowledge and knowledge of letter-sound relationships. The first step to a sort is always introducing the sort. When we introduce the sorts, we have to do some prep work first to get the sort ready, and then we do 2 things. We go over the words, and then we invite students to sort by sight and by sound and then by sight. So I gave everybody here has a word sort. I learned a little trick from Francine Johnston, who is one of the creators of Words Their Way, on how to deal with word sorts when you have 20-some students. So that's why I asked you to bring in a crayon and a pencil today. So the first thing that we do, and we can do it as teachers, we can get parents to do it, or we can teach our students to do it, is to take a crayon or a marker or something and give kids 10 seconds or take 10 seconds and color all over the back of the sheet. So go ahead and take just a moment and color all over the back of your sheet. You can make a pattern, you can draw a figure, whatever you want. When students learn to do this on their own, typically they'll choose a different color. So you will have students that have different colors that are next to each other. So when they lose the word tile and it falls on the floor, we know which one it is. We have some great artists in here. Take your last little bit of color and we're going to move on. Okay. We all know that when we work with kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, it can take 45 minutes to cut out a sort. And we don't have 45 minutes. So either as adults or if you want to train your second graders or first graders or even kindergartners to do this, I'm going to show you a shortcut on how to do the word sorts. So the first thing that we need to do is cut around the edges. Now as a teacher, one thing you can do is cut those off with a paper cutter before you even get into the classroom. But since we didn't do that this time, quickly cut around the 4 edges. Okay, so you should end up with a sheet like that. Okay, the next step is to cut vertically. So we're going to cut vertically along each of our columns. Once you've done that, put all 3 together. And you'll end up with 1 column.
They mess it up.
The last
They
step
mess it up. They do.
It's worth
is to
It's
cut
worth the
across.
time to just go ahead and do it.
because then they're not stressing about it. It's not.
And then they color part of their word apart or whatever.
When you do that, you'll end up with a pile of words. What you may also end up with
It's a mess.
Our tile is like this, so you can
Yep.
see I didn't cut perfectly. This can bug some students, so you have to do a little bit of talking about. What we're doing is looking at the words. It's not important that there's an extra part of the box there, or that part of the box is cut off. And kids will get used to it. It's gonna bother them in the beginning, but they will get used to it. And if Mrs. Church's kindergartners can get used to it, anybody's kindergartners or first or second graders can. Now, I would advocate, especially when you're starting out with this, cut it yourself or get a parent volunteer to cut it. By doing this, it at least takes less time than it would if you were cutting it the long way. So that's the first step. So once you're ready for your sort, then you begin your sort. To get us started today, I'm going to ask you all to sort the words in your word sort. So take a few minutes to sort it. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do it on your own, and then I'm going to ask you to find a couple words. Put the words that you think go together well together. Connect them like that. Okay, I'm going to ask you to pause for a minute and find the word change, like I'm going to change my clothes. Find the word badge, like I'm wearing a badge today. And then find the word page, like I'm turning the page in a book. Put those three at the top of your sort. So you're going to sort into three groups, one with words like badge, one with words like change, and one with words like page. Using all of our cards. Using all of the cards. Yeah, we have about 10 seconds left.
Because I'm uncomfortable with them here, but I'm going to, maybe it's consonant G. I am too uncomfortable with it.
Okay. If you were in a classroom now, you, as a teacher, we would take time and go through each word. But because I wanted you to get the experience of what it sort of felt like, I'm going to show you the answers. So feel free to go ahead and change your cards around to match this, if you don't already have it.
Oh, yeah, we do.
We don't have those words. We don't have sponge or range or orange.
Yeah, I do.
We have sponge and range. We don't have orange.
Well, I see, I think orange is the only one that didn't make it on there, but I see the rest of them on there. If you find ones that are not listed on here, just leave them to the side. It's possible that if you got left off, this means you. Okay, so you can look down at your tiles or look up here, and I want you to talk with your group members and think, what pattern, what sound letter relationships are these columns going to be?
Some of the consonant G.
I don't get wedge goes where hedge is.
Yeah. It could be hard for my
You think I just didn't put it there. I thought something was wrong there. I didn't have it right.
Because huge isn't up there.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is, okay, cage, huge, rage, stage, but there's something.
These are all kind of shorter.
Oh, they don't have a stage, okay.
Okay, anybody brave enough to share with us what letter sound relationships we have going on? Okay. Anybody else want to share what they think the pattern is? Ja. Okay, it has something to do with ja, it has something to do with the vowel. I won't keep you in suspense. Here it goes. So the two generalizations, or the two patterns we have going on here, are that the final sound of ja in these words is softened by the letter E that follows it, and the sound of the vowel in the middle of the word depends upon whether there is one consonant or two consonants between it and the final. So the point of this exercise is really to begin to feel what our students are experiencing and think about the brain power that it took us to sort those, because it was kind of tricky. My master's students, the teachers that are in my master's classes and my undergraduate students struggle with this sort. They have a hard time figuring out the categories. So it can be really challenging for our students. Now that you've had sort of an experience with it, you can go ahead and put your tiles to the side or away.
Is this a within word one, or which one, what level is this?
No, this is,
Higher, okay, that's what we were wondering, how high it would be.
yeah, this is not going to be one you give kindergartners, for sure.
Most of mine have pictures.
Yeah, I haven't.
Absolutely. This one is actually a homemade. Oh, yeah. And words their way sorts, you'll see in just a minute, you can make them or you can use the pre-made ones. And so this is one that I made. It's designed for adults in mind, obviously. We're trying to challenge adults because adults are experts in most patterns by the time they get to be teachers. Okay, so in the basic sort, as you kind of have experienced yourself, the first thing you have to do is prepare it. And so that means, in some sorts, like this one, this is a sort that you might use in kindergarten to study the L, K, J, and W. The first thing that you need to do is cut off the header. So when you use the sort, you're just going to be using the files. Once you prepare the sorts, then you need to select your keywords. Oftentimes in these pre-made sorts, they will have the keywords for you. Our keywords for our sort were badge, page, and change. But if they haven't selected one, then you can select them yourselves. That's what's gonna go at the top of your category. So what you don't do is you don't put the actual headers at the top of the category. You do put keywords. Why do you think we might do that?
Why do you not give it to them?
Yeah, why do you not use these, but you use keywords?
Then they have
Come
to,
to think.
Yeah, that's
they
right.
have to
They have
notice
to-
what it is.
So if we give them these, then we've already circuited the learning process. So we always use keywords of some sort. And in kindergarten or for students who are at the beginning stages, most often they're going to be pictures of something. One thing that I advocate when you're just getting started, try it out in small groups. Just meet with a small group and do the sort together. That's what I've been doing in Mrs. Church's room all semester, and it's been going fairly well. It takes kids a long time at the primary level to learn how to do it and to sort. So I recommend just starting at the small group. Don't dive right into the whole words no way class right away. Okay, when we do a sort, typically after we set up the keywords, then we demonstrate how to sort. You're going to see me do this in just a minute. Once we've demonstrated it so kids understand how we're doing it, and we've gone over any confusing or unknown words, then we have students help us do the sort. When we feel like students have gotten the hang of it, then the students can sort on their own. You're going to see these 3 steps in the sort in just a moment. One additional note. So somebody earlier mentioned oddballs. In our classrooms, we'll always have some people, some students, who try to sort of short circuit the process or who try to play the game because they know they're going to have to come up with a letter sound pattern. So they're going to go right for the letters. They're going to say, oh, we're sorting by L's or whatever today. And the way that we can circumvent that is by using what are called oddballs. So oddballs are words that seem to follow the pattern but that don't actually fit. So in this particular example, when we're sorting by care and chair, you can see we're really trying to get the A consonant E and then the A to R controlled sort going on here. But you can throw in words like bear and pear, which sound the same and have an R at the end but don't have the same vowel spelling to sort of throw children, slow them down a little bit. It has the added advantage of helping students deepen their knowledge. So they'll have to think through, wait, does this go here or does it not go there? What's going on here as they're going through the sort? One additional thing before we watch the sort, I just want to make sure to mention. The key to Words Their Way is really doing it according to your students. So you have to really know your students well. What will happen though is this. We make our best guess of how to sort that would be appropriate. Okay, oftentimes, especially if you're doing it in small groups, you'll have 5 different students there. Well, it might fit, the sort might fit 3 students really well, but 2 students poorly. Or it might not fit the whole group well. Might be too hard, might be too easy. That's okay. We'll get better as we know our students better and as we go further into this. The thing that we need to remember as teachers is, one, that multiple exposures are key. So if you have a student or students who are like, this is so easy, they know this already, it still helps to give them more exposure and just firm up their knowledge, so it's not a waste. And also, it develops their awareness and knowledge of routines. So Words Their Way is one of those things that's very dependent on teaching these instructional routines. And especially with primary students, it may take a semester to teach those instructional routines. So even if you think the sort is too easy for a student, actually you're accomplishing 2 good things. You're firming up their knowledge, and you're also helping them build that knowledge of how to do Words Their Way every time you sort with them. So it's still a valuable instructional experience. Later, with Amy, or if I come back or whatever, we can dive more into how you do it. But the key to Words Their Way really is knowing your students, grouping them, and then picking sorts that are appropriate for them. Okay, now that you've listened to me talk for a while, we're going to watch a Words Their Way lesson. So as we're watching, I asked you to do 2 things. I asked you to think about, what do you notice about students thinking and learning? And then, how am I supporting students thinking and learning in this lesson? Do I just...
Play. Touch on the screen.
paint gray sort that I did on Wednesday. What's that word? To,
And this word is clean. What's that word? What's that word? Clean, very good.
I think it was Marin and Owen, their names? Okay, all right, so it was Marin and Owen.
So we're going to think about which words are most like these words as we start. So we have this word joking. So I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'm going to think it's joking like this word. So joking, they don't sound very much alike. So I'm going to say joking, hopping. They don't sound very much alike. So I'm going to say joking, hoping. Oh, I noticed they sound alike. They both have that O sound. Hoping and joking. What do you know about the O sound? Is it a long O or a short O? It's a long O. Let's try another one. So I want you to help me now. Let's think. It's nodded like clean. Nodded.
Yeah.
How is it like? They both have the same ending, don't they? That way everything is yeah. Let's try another one. See if we can find one more. Hoping, nodded. Does that sound the same? No. Let's try this one. Nodded, hopping.
Yeah.
Oh, and you nodded your head. How do they sound the same? Hopping and nodded. What do you notice about their sound?
They're short O. They both have short O.
Yeah, they both make the, what's that sound?
Ah.
Ah, yeah, the short O sound. Ah sound. Let's try another one. Oh, this is a really tough one. Okay, leaking, hoping. Should I click out under hoping? They sound the same. They both have the same ending, don't they? A maybe? All right, well, let's try another one, see if we can find a yes. Leaking, hopping. Leaking, hopping. That doesn't sound very much alike. How about clean, leaking?
Yeah.
Oh, you nodded your head? Why do you think leaking goes under hoping?
Because they both have the E-A.
They both have the E sound, don't they? Spelled with how many vowels? Spelled with 2 vowels. Well, let's look here. Joking and hopping. How many vowels do they have? Right here. How many vowels?
2. Well, the O is a vowel, but if you add the I, now
Yeah, so let's take off that and just pretend it's that.
Hope.
They have 1, right? So hoping and joking have 1 vowel right here. Okay. If we looked at clean and leaked right there, how many vowels do they have? They have 2. So we said that hoping has the long vowel sound, right? And we said that leaking and clean have the shorter one.
Yeah.
The long, so they both have the long vowel sound, but how are they different?
That one has 2 and this one has 1.
Yeah, Owen, good. So this one has 2 and that one has 1. Let's think about that as we sort our next word. Oh, so here's a good one. Telling. Where do we put telling under? Hoping, hopping, or clean? Cleaned, hopping, hoping. Telling, hoping. Clean. Okay, let's think about that. So in telling, is it a short or long? Short. And in cleaned, is it a short or long? So should it go there? So let's see. Hopping or hoping? Okay, let's think about that. Okay, and you think, Mary, is it Mary? Mary, you think under hopping. Why do you think it might go under hopping? Telling, hopping. They both have short vowels, right? And how many vowels do they have? Right there. They both have 1 right there, right? So hopping is short and has 1 vowel. And telling is short and it has 1 vowel right there too. Very good. All right, let's try another one. Oh, and I bet you can do this. Where do you think faded would go? Would it go under hoping, hopping, or clean? You put it under hoping. Why did you put it under hoping? Well, let's explore that for a minute. So So why might it go under hoping? What do you notice about the vowel? Fade.
It's long.
It's long.
And
Very good. And then what about hoping? Yeah, and it has one vowel, right? Yep. So did you get that right? Does it belong under hoping? Yeah, it did, because you said that they both make the long vowel sound, and they use one vowel to do it. Very good, Ellen. All right, let's see if Maren can try letting. I'm going to let you do this, letting. Hoping, hopping. What do you notice about the vowel? Very good. So we know it doesn't go there. You're right. So should we put it under hoping or hopping? What do you notice about this vowel sound? Hopping and hoping. Hopping. Okay, let's see. Letting. Is that a long vowel sound or a short vowel sound? It's short. So hoping. Is that a long vowel sound or a short one? Under vowel. Okay, so why do you think it goes under hopping? What do you notice about the vowel?
that one is short, exactly like that one. They both have one vowel.
Absolutely right. Very good. So this has one vowel and it makes a short sound. Okay. Why don't you try that one on? Skipped. So why does it go under clean? Okay, it has the same ending. But let's think about the vowels. What do you notice about the vowel sounds? Okay. Okay, so does that go there? No. Why did you put it under hopping?
That has short, that's short vowel. And this is short vowel.
Very good. It's short and short. And how many are there? One. Very good, Owen. Okay, here's a really tough one, Maren. Greeted. Oh, you put that under clean right away. Why does it go under clean?
Because they both have two vowels, and the two vowels are both long, and they also both have the same thing.
Oh, you noticed a lot of things about that. Very good. Okay. Try both of those. Racing and skating. Where should we put them? Why did you both put racing and skated under hoping?
They both have a
They both have the
long
A sound, the A sound.
vowel.
And it's long, good. And how many vowels are there? One vowel each. Let's read through our words today and see how they're the same. So read with me. Hoping, joking, faded, racing, skating. What do you notice about the vowel sounds in these words?
They're all long.
They're all long. Absolutely, they are all long sounds. We got the O and the A sound. What do you notice about the consonant that comes right after the vowel sound? How many are there? Right here. Hoping. There's one here. How many is here? And how many is here? And here? Oh, so there's one. So we can say that if it has the long vowel sound, how many consonants are going to come right after? One. Let's see if that's true of this column. Read these with me. Hopping, nodded, telling, letting, skip. What do you notice about the vowel sounds?
Right after.
They're short. Notice about the consonants that come after.
But there's always two that come out.
Yeah, there's always two that. Okay, take just a few minutes and turn and talk at your tables. What did you notice about students thinking and learning? And how am I supporting students thinking and learning in this work?
And a lot of them do. They do, they look at that as just super strong. It shows that.
understand why the word is there. Doesn't understand why, because he seemed very concerned and he didn't want to be wrong. And that's, yeah. It was one. She's doing something.
She before they did ask her, so she was still like,
Yeah, because it was literally the students by themselves. Actually, I like program. So she goes to the I've seen her. She's usually here on Mondays and That would be good to ask. I mean, because it's kind of hard to think to get that pair. For example, questions that you might ask. Is that possible to
For
get?
sure, yeah, the first conversation.
I mean, you get good at it after time.
I think there's a lot of there, now there's just a lot of coaching and coaxing, so you need to figure out how to do some small.
Like if you can get them to think. We just can't.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they would have gotten there at some point.
Yeah. Before you drop it, yeah, because that's why it was long, right? Well, maybe that was day two. The one had the extra content, like you double the content. So then, once they got to there, they moved to the, yeah. Right, or what do you, exactly, as opposed to. Yeah.
But yeah,
It's so small, it's,
yeah. But I think that first day, which I haven't been good about doing, that you introduce it, to have everyone, have a document camera, and have everybody, soliciting advice, or soliciting help for the whole class. I think it's definitely doable. Yeah.
Theoretically, they're all the same.
They're not, but yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure.
But when you're, like, you're not gonna have them at the same level, because that's the whole point, like, the
Right,
differentiation.
right. So then you do it with whatever you've got in that group. However many kids are in that group, they're working with you, and everybody else is off doing an older sort or something.
All right, I heard some really powerful observations among the groups. Who would like to share something they observed?
They're constructing their knowledge. So it's not the teacher saying, this is the rule, these are examples. It's children seeing the patterns and constructing some kind of a rule or idea based on what they notice, which is a great way to learn.
Absolutely. So that's what we're seeing in students thinking and learning. How am I supporting that to happen? What did you notice about the things that I said or the things I did?
Ask a lot of questions to make them explain this.
I asked a lot of questions. A lot of questions.
Yeah, and when Owen said, this is hard, you didn't say like, well, figure it out. Like you asked follow-up questions or
We're focusing on what they were doing correctly, not what they were doing incorrectly.
Absolutely. I was definitely doing that. What else did you notice?
You referred to the keywords a lot, comparing those to.
Absolutely. I referred to it not only with my voice, but I also put them right next to the keywords so that they could visually pair it together in their head and think. You can see that those students who obviously had a lot of knowledge were still struggling to figure out what to do with that because the two keywords were the same, hoping and hopping. It was just that one little difference in sound.
But then I noticed that, like, very quickly, if they put it in one column, then I don't know if it was just that they looked at the other words that were in that column, but then right away they were like, no, it doesn't go here. So there was some, I think they were really thinking about what you were teaching them about the sounds and letters.
Absolutely. So you notice an important part of developing that awareness. They're really beginning to sort of monitor and detect those errors and then correct them themselves. Absolutely. What else did you notice?
Well, I liked that you made them give an explanation for where they were putting it, because it took away guessing, because I think so much of the time that first graders and second grade, they want to guess, but they had to give an explanation of why you were having them put it in that category, and I
absolutely. So that helps get rid of that guessing piece. How else does it help students if you're having students articulate it?
They're thinking through what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're firming it up in their mind. What about when one of them was talking, the other wasn't? What's the benefit to the other student who's not saying anything?
Well, I think they're learning from the student who's talking.
They're hearing it, right? They're hearing it not once, but
Right.
twice, 3 times, 4 times, 20 times, 30 times. So even when you're working with those readers that are struggling, they get that chance of that repetition many, many times during that 15 minutes. One thing about Words Their Way is that there we go, is that the language is absolutely central. So you already noticed many of these things. My questions were focused on the students' reasoning. I was getting them to articulate what they're noticing about the sounds, because this was a more advanced group. We talked about the number of vowels and things like that. But in a kindergarten classroom or a less advanced group, you'd just be focusing on, it makes the ah sound, the O sound. One thing you may have noticed is that right at the beginning, Owen tried to say it has a short O. And I redirected him from focusing on the letter O to the sound by saying it makes what sound. And then first he said O, and then he said ah on the short sound. That is how we get kids to keep that focus on the sound. And then it promotes the error detection, because I didn't say, oh, you're wrong. What I said is, let's think about that. And then I led them by talking through, this is this word, and then talking about the properties of it to figure out, is it right or is it wrong, and then to correct it when it was wrong. As I said just a minute ago, by redirecting them through those questions, we can keep the focus on the sounds and not so much on the letters. For those kids who want to just shortcut and say, we're sorting by L's and M's, we keep saying, we're sorting by the L, N sound, so on and so forth. It also helps keep kids from skipping forward. You'll have many kids who just want to go right to, let's talk about what the sound pattern is. And by asking those questions and sort of funneling them through it, we slow those kids down too. And then the other thing that many of you noticed is that I did a lot of praising. And what I praised was when they were exhibiting that awareness or that perception. By giving positive praise in a group, we all know as teachers that it makes many students want to do more of it. And then they begin to think that they're good at solving words or whatever it is we want them to teach. Repetition is absolutely key. There's 2 things that you notice I never did, though. One is I never invited them to sort of speculate, what are we sorting by today throughout that whole process. You will have students who will just call out, well, we're sorting by short vowel and long vowel or whatever today. And then we put on our teacher, let's ignore them hat, just not say anything to them and move on. And then they'll quickly get the picture. And the longer you do this, the less you'll have those outbursts. Because they know, well, we're not talking about the pattern yet. Well, now all we're doing is sorting words. They might mentally be thinking it, but they won't shout it out. And I also never told the students the pattern. What got kind of cut off at the end of it because we ran out of videotape is the next step in the process. What you saw mostly was the actual sort. Now, sorts and Words Their Way classrooms are done in a particular way. What I have found, especially when you're getting started, is the kind of sort that you saw me do here is much more effective because it allows you to really be responsive to students and sort of keep close tabs on them. So when you're starting in your small groups, the kind of sort that you saw on here is a good sort to do. I'm going to skip ahead for just a minute. The next step is called talking, or Words Their Way refers to it as check and reflect. So let's pretend that we have this sort. You saw a little bit of this at the end. The first thing that we do is we check the column. So I'm going to ask you to pretend to be students for just a minute and to work with me on our check and reflect period. So let's read these words together. Please read them with me. Kite, bride, write, hide, wipe, mice. What do you notice about the sounds in those words? How are they the same? They have the I sound in them, right? So kite, bride, write, hide, wipe, and mice all have that I sound. What do you notice about the letters? How did they make the I sound?
They all have silent E.
Okay, so we all call it silent E, but kids might call it other things. They might say I, consonant E, I, blank E, magic E, whatever. But yes, they have the I, consonant E pattern here. Let's look over here. Read these words with me. Might, night, bright, bright, tight, light. What do you notice about the sounds in all those words?
I.
They all make the I sound. What do you notice about the letters? How are they the same? That's right. So we can say that these words make the I sound by spelling it I-G-H. Let's look at our last column. Read them with me. Wild, kind, mind, child, blind, mild. What do you notice about the sounds in those words? They all make the I sound. What do you notice about the letters in those words?
I is the only vowel.
Oh, so then we could single someone out and say,
I is the only vowel.
oh, so, I'm sorry, can you tell me your first name?
Barb.
So Barb noticed that I is the only vowel in here, and that's the only thing that's really the same, because there's I-L, I-N, so those are different. So we can say that they all have the I sound. So we can say here that these words all make the I sound with the letter I. Okay, so that's the first step in the check and reflect. So we just checked all the words, and we had students articulate what the patterns were. Now, because you were all experts and adults, you guys right away got to it. But this is a stage where you might have to guide students. You might have to talk about, what do you notice here? What, how many vowels are there? Those sorts of things. What do you notice at the end of each of the words? You might have to use those prompts. The next step is to articulate it in a generalization. So this would be a kind of a generalization that you could articulate. Now in kindergarten, we've just been doing this verbally. Words Their Way recommends actually having students write it down in like a words journal or putting it on the board or something like that, so that students not only hear it, but also see it. And so that's something you may want to consider doing at some point. So a way that I might get to it is to say, so we have noticed today that all of these words make the I sound, but they make them different ways. How do all of these make the I sound? And then somebody in your group will say, I consonant E. And then all of these make the I sound how? I-G-H. And then all of these make the I sound with just the I. So we can say today that we looked at words that make the I sound, and the I sound can be spelled with just an I, or with an I consonant E, or with I-G-H. And there's the end of your check and reflect. So that's a second really key step in the Words Their Way process. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. And I just call it talking because that's the point at which you're really having a discussion about the word. And so we always focus first on here and second on C. The back table there is a great question that someone asked me, and it was, is there a list of the questions that you should ask to guide these words? There is not. So a lot of it is just learning through experience. You can imitate models. That's sometimes helpful. I gave you a couple of questions here and a couple of suggestions about how you can word a generalization here. But really, this is what we as teachers develop skill at. We hone our skill at this. And once you've done that, you can really teach some powerful lessons. And that's the first thing to kind of focus on when you're learning how to do the Words Their Way process. Okay, so I have to take a quick drink break. So while I'm drinking, your job is to turn and talk with the people in your group. What questions could we use to guide students thinking on this sort? Which generalization would be appropriate to use during the check and reflect talk? Just try to talk.
Did you read all those words together? What sound do they, what do you notice the same here in all of the words? How is that sound made? Does that sound?
Some of them rolled up, and then I would Like, why did you put this sort together, I think would be the question.
How are these, how are the vowels like these?
And what does this, what's the sound?
Or five sound sound.
Yeah,
And where are the vowels? Right next to it.
right.
What are some questions we might use to guide students thinking?
What sound do you hear?
Okay, what sound do you hear? Now, how could we help students hone in on the right sound? Because you may have students who look at the beginning sound or look at the end sound, and we really want them to focus on the middle sound here. So how could we take what sound you hear and help that student who's not quite with us on where they need to look? What word could we add to that?
What sound is the same?
Oh,
What vowel sound?
okay, so we could say what vowel sound. We could even, depending on whether your kids know what a vowel is, you could simply just say, what sound do you hear in the middle? Just to help them arrow in on it. What other questions could we use to guide them?
Asking like how they're alike.
Sure. How are these similar? How are these the same?
How's it making the long vowel sound?
How's it making a long vowel sound? What if we have a student who takes road and puts on a rope because they hear that the R is the same? What are you going to do with that student?
So, wow, good ears, but we're actually going to try to look at maybe the middle sound.
Okay, good. So first we validate the good word thinking they were doing, which was you heard the same sound at the beginning. That's really good. And then we could say what?
Okay, but do those look anything alike? Do they, I know they've got the R and then the O, but what about after that? Do we have anything in common? They both make the long O sound, but how are we getting there? How is it making that sound?
Okay, so that's one way that we could go.
As soon as you have a word that doesn't begin with an R and that needs to go in our column, then we talk about that.
Okay, so that's a great point. So sometimes you'll go through and you'll choose not to correct the student, then to stop there. The student may notice as soon as they get to the next word that, oh wait, that's in the wrong spot. And then you could walk through it. The key is to get them to notice that, oh, they both make the O sound, but the letters are different at the end. So it's that, in this sort, is combining the sound first, but also you have the letters. Okay, so besides the language, the other tricky thing, or the thing that we need to know as Words Their Way teachers, is that in order to be successful with these sorts, we really have to carefully plan the level of difficulty with the sort. There's all sorts of different sorts in Words Their Way. So there's these things called closed sorts, which I'm going to talk about just in a minute, buddy sorts, open sorts, writing sorts, and speed sorts. Now, some of this may be familiar to some of you, but we can deploy them in ways that make things harder or easier for our students. And so we need to think, okay, my students have never seen this, they have absolutely no knowledge, so I need to give them the most support that I can. And when we do that, we do a closed sort, which I'm just going to talk about in a minute. But let's say that we know that we've introduced it at some point, they probably have at least some awareness of it. It's on their radar, so they're a little bit familiar with it. So then you might, as a teacher, decide, we're going to do open sorts, which I'm going to talk about what that is in a minute. Because I want to make it a little bit more challenging for the student. I don't want to make it quite as supportive. Because they already have some knowledge that they can use on their own. Another way to make it easier or harder is to adjust the number of categories. So in the sort that you saw me teach, I used 3 categories. And we've been using 3 categories. But if you're working with something that you know is going to be challenging to the students you're working with, you can make it just 2 categories. Or if you know that this is going to be really easy, you could start off with 4 categories. So as a teacher, you get to choose how many categories. And how many categories will determine how hard the sort is. Because if it's 4 categories, they have to do a lot of thinking about the patterns. Obviously, if it's 2, it's either or. It's got to be one or the other. You could throw in oddballs as well to increase the challenge. So just to reiterate, this repetition piece is key. So what that also means is that maybe on the first day, if you're doing the small group approach and you're not quite up to the Words Their Way classroom, you're meeting with kids every time, you could start out with a closed sort on the first day. Then the next day they could do a buddy sort, and then the next day you could have them do maybe the writing or the speed sort. So they're doing it again and again and again, and it's going to start to look like they're really fast at it because they're memorizing the sort in essence. But even though they are memorizing the sort, they're actually memorizing the letter patterns. And We'll talk about how we extend that to beyond the word tiles in just a minute. But you can do that, again, by adjusting the sort. So what are open and closed sorts? Closed sorts are sorts where you give students the keywords. So in that particular sort, I would give them care and chair and say, okay, today we're going to sort our words into two groups. Words that are like care and words that are like chair. This is obviously highly supported because we've already sort of determined the patterns. Students have to follow those patterns. An open sort is the opposite. We just give them the sorts like I did at the beginning. And we say, okay, today we're going to sort our words, and then they sort. That's a high degree of challenge because you haven't defined the parameters yet. What you notice that what I did with the sort when I first handed it out to you was be responsive to my students. So I saw people putting all sorts of different groups together. So I said, okay, sort by these three words. So I took an open sort and I moved it to a closed sort because it was too hard for my group that I was instructing. You can do that as well. But that's what it means by open and closed. There are other sorts, buddy sorts, writing sorts, and speed sorts, but that's beyond the scope of what I can provide now. So Amy can provide more information about that, or I can come back and help you with it as well. So if I were going to do a closed sort with this, I would say, today we're going to sort by words that are like care and words that are like chair. If I wanted it to be an open sort, though, let's say I had a group who was looking at this pattern and I felt like they could do this on their own. I might say something like, okay, today I want you to sort your words into two categories. So I've given them help by letting them know it all has to fit into two, but I haven't told them what to. Okay, so take just a second and think in your mind, how would you introduce it if it were a closed sort? If you had this sort, think in your mind, how would you introduce this if it were a closed sort? If it were me introducing it, I might say something like, today we're going to sort our words into two groups. We're going to sort words that are like step and words that are like week. So you may have thought of that in your head. How would you introduce this if this were an open sort? Think in your mind for just a minute. If this were an open sort, what could you say? You may be thinking of something like, today we're going to sort words, but I'm not going to tell you which words to sort by. We're going to put them into two groups, something like that. Okay, so we have dealt so far with the sorting and the guess and check. There's a third step, or a third part of the lesson, and unfortunately, the lesson you saw got cut off because we ran out of videos. But in this, we offer an extension. So this goes at the very end, after we've checked and reflected. And what they're doing is they're applying their knowledge of what they just learned to something new. Okay? It could look a couple ways. So what Words Their Way recommends is to have the students sort the words again. So they're sort of taking what you talked about in the whole group and putting it in their brain and using it on their own. So it's a very limited type of application. And that's a great way to go. It takes time. And what I found working in the kindergarten classroom I've been working in is that this takes way longer than planned. So there's another way to do extension that takes a lot less time. And what you can do is just give them some additional words. So you can verbally say the words, or you can give them additional word tiles and just have them put them where they would go. That takes a lot less time and still encourages them to do that application. But that's always the third step of the process because you want them to reinforce for themselves what they learned. In addition, we have other extension activities throughout the week. So we have students play games that are practicing the principles that they're learning that week. So here are two examples. So this is an alphabet egg game where there's the uppercase and the lowercase form of a letter, and they have to match them together. And then this is a game called Gruff Drops Trollette Bridge Game, and they're studying initial blends here. So what they have to do is they have to come up with a word that has that blend in it in order to move forward. So you can either invent those games, or many of you probably have them, but have students play those throughout the week to reinforce that pattern. So we're running low on time, so we're going to kind of skip this question. But as you go forth, think about what alphabet and phonics games you already have that could be used to reinforce students' learning. Okay, here's the very last tip I think that I have for today. And so my last tip is respond. So the other thing that makes Words Their Way sort successful is that we respond in the moment to our students. Sometimes, as we said, sorts are going to be too easy, sometimes they're going to be too hard. If sorts are too hard, we can do things like have the group do it all together in one, and we all work together to share our brain power. Or we can take away a whole category, or we can take away a bunch of words. The sort that you saw is actually half of the sort that was in the Words Their Way book, because there were so many words it was taking way too long to sort them. So I made it easier and quicker by taking away a bunch of the words. You can also, as I did, just tell students to sort by certain keywords if it's too hard. If it's too hard for one student, you can walk the student through it using the questions, kind of like you saw me do during the lesson. You can also have other students sort and share their reasoning first, and then give the students who are having trouble a word that has the same exact pattern in it, so that what they're essentially doing is repeating what the people before them have said. That really helps them firm up that word knowledge. And then you can have everybody sort independently if they're all getting it at your table, and then work with the one who is struggling. So this is if you're in a small group and you're working together on the sort. You start out together. These are ways to make it easier if it's too hard for just one student. It could be too easy. So if it's too easy, you can do things like you started off that sort, you started all together, you realize this is way too easy for them. You could have them all just sort it independently, so they would each have their own sorts like you did at the beginning, and they just do it on their own, and then you come back together afterward and talk about it. If you're starting, you could also convert the sort into a buddy sort, which is having two people work together on the sort. So it would be like them doing it individually, but they'd work together. So you'd have, if you have 6 students, you'd have 3 sorts going. You could also speed up the pace and add a more elaborate, challenging extension. So that would be another option if it's too easy. In Mrs. Church's room, this has happened to me a couple times, and so we sped it right up, and then we went right to the students sorting it on their own because it was too easy. Yes.
Are you doing a whole, like, everyone's doing the same sort in her room?
Yeah, so what we're doing in the kindergarten room is what I said at the beginning, we're doing it in small groups. So there's a small group at the back, and then everybody else is working other things. So they're on iPad, they're on games, they're on things like that. And then they leave, and then another group comes. That's not the full Words Their Way classroom model, but it's a great way to get started and get your feet under it and to teach kids how to do the model. Words Their Way actually advocates you doing it as a whole group, but I don't know how to successfully do that with kindergartners. 25 kindergartners to be on the same page when they have word tiles on their desk. So you could pull them all up to the front carpet and do it like on the board, but I don't think they could all do their own sorts. So that would be another way. But I advocate doing small group. It's a great way to get in lots of practice as a teacher. Okay. Oh, there was one more sort. So this is my final thing. I encourage you to start small. It's overwhelming learning how to do Words Their Way. So if you start small, you pull a group, you practice it, you pull another group, you practice it, you'll quickly get up to speed and you'll begin to see how it goes, learn the language, and begin to think about what kids know and what they don't know, to sort them or resort them into groups. Don't put pressure on yourself to be a full Words Their Way classroom on day 1. Full Words Their Way classroom, by the way, looks like this. You have 3 or 4 groups, you meet with each group once, and then they're doing independent activities the rest of the day with those sorts. That is the goal of Words Their Way. It's what I think is where you work toward, but you don't start off there, in my opinion, in my experience. So what I want you to take away today is this. In a Words Their Way lesson, there's sort of 3 phases. One is sorting, the second is talking, which Words Their Way calls check and reflect, and the third is extension. As we're doing this, we need to think carefully about our students, about the language we're using to guide the sort and the thinking, and about the level of challenge that we're planning in our sorts, and then how we can adjust in the moment to students' responses, and then building up toward the full-blown version of the Words Their Way classroom. Each of you has a white sheet on your desk, a little ticket. As we wrap up, I would like you to please list these 3 things. You don't have to put your name on it or anything, but the most important thing you learned today, the most pressing question in your mind about teaching with Words Their Way, And one action that you plan to take now that you've experienced this session. As you're doing this, with the minute or so we have left, feel free to ask me any questions you may have.